Voyage to the Moon. Apollo 11. The historic launch of the Apollo 11 mission carried 3 astronauts towards the moon. 2 of them would set foot on the moon's powdery surface for the first time in human history, as 600 million people around the world followed their steps on television. Mission objective. The primary objective of Apollo 11 was to complete a national goal set by President John F. Kennedy on May 25, 1961. Perform a crewed lunar landing and return to Earth.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space.
Other flight objectives included scientific exploration by the lunar module, crew deployment of a television camera to transmit signals to Earth, deployment of a solar wind experiment, seismic experiment package, and laser-ranging retroreflector. During the exploration, the 2 astronauts were to gather samples of lunar surface materials for a return to Earth. They also were to photograph the lunar terrain, their scientific equipment, the LM spacecraft, and each other, both with still and motion picture cameras. This was to be the last Apollo mission to fly a free return trajectory, which would enable a return to Earth with no engine firing, providing a ready abort of the mission at any time prior to lunar orbit insertion. Timeline of the 1969 moon landing. Apollo 11 launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time on July 16, 1969. Armstrong, a 38-year-old civilian research pilot, was the commander of the mission. The other 2 astronauts were Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins. After traveling 240,000 miles in 72 hours, Apollo 11 entered into a lunar orbit on July 19th. The next day at 1:46 p.m., the lunar module Eagle, manned by Armstrong and Aldrin, separated from the command module where Collins remained. 2 hours later, the Eagle began its descent to the moon's surface, and at 4:17 p.m., the craft touched down on the southwestern edge of the Sea of Tranquility. Armstrong immediately radioed to Mission Control in Houston, Texas, the famous message, "The Eagle has landed." For the first 2 hours on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin remained in the module and checked all of the systems, configured the craft for its stay on the moon, and had a bite to eat. In consultation with NASA, they decided to skip their scheduled 4-hour rest and decided to go outside and explore the moon's surface. At 10:39 p.m., 5 hours ahead of the original schedule, Armstrong opened the hatch of the lunar module. As he made his way down the module's ladder, a television camera attached to the craft recorded his progress and beamed the signal back to Earth. At 10:56 p.m., as Armstrong stepped off the ladder and planted his foot on the moon's powdery surface, he spoke the famous quote, which he later contended was slightly garbled by his microphone, and meant to be, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." Having spent a total of 21.5 hours on the moon, the lunar module blasted back to where Collins waited in the Columbia. The two vehicles docked, and the crew and samples transferred to the Columbia before the Eagle was jettisoned into space. The astronauts then headed back to Earth. The team splashed down in the Pacific Ocean at 12:50 p.m. Eastern Time on July 24th, only a few miles from the recovery ship, the USS Hornet. The observations and samples collected by the Apollo 11 crew led to many exciting discoveries. Among these was the strengthening of the theory that our moon was created as a chip off the Earth 4.5 billion years ago. A large object must have collided with the Earth at that time.
I think that we were timely in accepting this mission of going to the moon. It might be timely at this point to think in many other areas of other missions that could be accomplished.
Well, to me, there are near and far-term aspects to it. On the near term, I think it's a technical triumph for this country to have said what it was going to do a number of years ago, and then by golly do it, just like we said we were going to do it.
I just see it as a beginning, not just this flight, but in this program, which is really a very short piece of human history, an instant in history.